Elsie Ward saw the coat before she saw the room. It hung on the peg beside the front door. A long brown canvas duster with a split at the hem. One sleeve patched in darker cloth. The shoulders shaped by a man who had worn it through weather and work and maybe through lies. The girl stopped so suddenly her brother nearly stepped into her back. Ada Keene noticed. She was standing near the stove with one hand pressed against the hard round weight of the baby beneath her coat, watching the two children take in Split Ash Ranch for the first time. The boy looked at the windows. The girl looked at the coat, not curious, not shy, like she had found a ghost waiting where a coat ought to be. "That was my husband's," Ada said. Elsie's fingers tightened around the rag doll in her arms. The doll had lost one button eye and most of its face to years of being held too hard. The boy, Tobin, moved half a step in front of his sister. "She ain't being rude," he said. "I did not say she was." Tobin looked at Ada as if measuring whether that answer had teeth in it. Ada let him measure. She had seen that look at the county receiving room in Crowtooth Crossing, though there it had been sharper, calder. The look of a boy who had already decided the world was dangerous and was only waiting to learn what shape the danger would take. That morning, Ada had placed her last silver dollar on Mr. Pell's desk and said, "I'll take both of them." The clerk had stared first at the coin, then at her stomach. "Mrs. Keene," he said, "you are in no condition to take one child, much less two. I did not ask you to weigh my condition. That boy nearly bit a man last week." "Good," Ada said. "So did I." Mr. Pell had not laughed after that. The county called the place a receiving room, but it smelled like wet wool, old smoke, sour milk, and children who had stopped expecting anyone to come back. Some sat on benches. Some stood along the wall. A few looked up when Ada entered, but most kept their eyes down. Hope, she had learned, could tire a person worse than work. She had not come looking for sweet faces. She had come looking for survivors. Tobin Ward was 15, lean as a fence rail, with dark eyes and hands already rough enough for winter labor. Elsie was 9, smaller than she should have been, quiet in the way of children who had learned silence, kept food from being taken and tempers from being stirred. Ada had walked straight toward them. "My name is Ada Keene," she said. "I have a ranch 30 miles north. The roof leaks over the back room. The north fence is down in 3 places. There is wood to split every day, cattle to check, and a baby coming before spring. It will not be easy." Tobin said nothing. Ada looked at him. "Can you swing an axe?" "Yes." "Can you handle cattle in bad weather?" "Yes." "Ever pulled a calf in the middle of a storm?" "No." "Neither have I." Ada said, "We will learn quick or lose stock." Something moved in his face then. Not trust. Not yet. But attention. She looked at Elsie. "Do you talk much?" Elsie glanced at her brother. He gave the smallest nod. "When there is something worth saying," she answered. Ada almost smiled. "Almost. I have $1. Ada said, "That is all. My husband died in November. There are banknotes on the ranch I did not know about until after they lowered him into the ground. I cannot promise comfort. I can promise a roof, a stove, food when there is food, and work that means something." Tobin's jaw tightened. "And if we want to leave, then you leave. I am not buying prisoners." "Why take both?" "Because you are holding yourself like you would burn the building down before you left her behind." Tobin looked at Elsie. Elsie looked back. Whatever passed between them had no need for words. "All right," Tobin said. So Ada signed the paper, left her last dollar on the desk, and drove them north under a sky low enough to scrape the plains. The snow started before they reached the ranch. Not soft snow. Not pretty snow. Hard, sideways Montana snow that found every gap in a coat and punished it. Tobin pulled the second blanket over Elsie before Ada asked. When the old mare stumbled near the wash, he was out of the wagon fast, steadying the harness with hands that knew too much for a boy. By the time they reached Split Ash, Ada's fingers had gone numb around the reins. Tobin helped her down without making a show of it. "Thank you," she said. He only nodded and turned to lift Elsie from the wagon bed. Now they stood in the main room, with snow ticking against the windows and Samuel Keene's duster hanging by the door like a question no one had yet dared to ask. Ada took off her gloves. "The back room is yours," she said. "2 cots, quilts in the trunk. Supper will be salt, pork, and cornbread if the meal has not turned." "That is fine," Tobin said. "It is not fine. It is what there is." He looked at her then, a little less guarded. "Because a hard truth," said Keene, "could be easier to trust than a soft lie." That night, after salt pork and cornbread, Ada showed them the back room. Elsie saved half her bread in a handkerchief. Ada saw it and did not stop her. Some hungers needed proof before they believed morning would come. Later, with the house dark and the stove ticking low, Ada woke to voices through the wall. Elsie whispered first, "Do you think she knows?" Tobin answered at once, "No, she does not know anything." Ada lay still, one hand over the baby, eyes open in the dark. Outside, snow covered the road behind them. Inside, the dead man's coat hung by the door. 3 days passed before Tobin Ward asked how bad the money was. He did not ask while carrying wood. He did not ask while breaking ice from the water trough with the back of an axe. He did not ask while walking the south pasture fence in snow that came up over his boot tops, or while bringing Elsie a pail of warm water because her hands had gone red from scrubbing dishes in cold. He waited until night. Ada sat at the kitchen table with the ranch ledger open beneath the lamp, one hand holding a pencil, the other pressed against the side of her belly where the baby kept shifting, like it had an opinion on every number. The house was quiet except for the stove and the wind. Elsie had fallen asleep in the chair near the hearth, with her rag doll tucked under one arm and a folded piece of cornbread still wrapped in her handkerchief. Tobin came in from the barn, knocked snow from his boots, and hung his coat on the peg farthest from Samuel Keene's duster. Ada noticed that too. He sat across from her without being invited. "How bad?" he asked. Ada looked up. "You asking because you want to know, or because you have already decided to do something foolish?" "Both." That answer deserved truth. She turned the ledger around. Tobin leaned over the table. The lamplight cut shadows under his cheekbones. His finger moved down the columns. Slow at first, then faster. 3 notes, he said. "Yes." "Different banks." "Yes?" "Samuel did not tell you." Ada's hand tightened once on the pencil. "No." Tobin's eyes moved over the figures again. North parcel due in spring. Barn note due after thaw. House note after summer grazing. You read numbers quick. "I have had reasons." She did not ask what reasons. "Not yet." He tapped the ledger near a column of expenses. "You let the last hand go in December. I could not pay him." "Then it has been you alone." "Yes." "In your condition." Ada closed the ledger halfway. "Careful. I did not mean it soft." "I know. That is why I said careful." He sat back, for the first time since she had brought him from Crow Tooth Crossing. Ada saw anger in him that was not aimed at her. It was aimed at the table. The numbers, the dead man whose coat still hung by the door, and every person who had handed trouble to a pregnant widow and called it business. "I can handle outside work," Tobin said. "You are 15. I can still handle it. You are also not a hired man." His mouth hardened. "Then what am I?" The question stayed between them. Elsie stirred in the chair but did not wake. Ada looked at Tobin plainly. "I do not know yet," she said. "But you are not a tool I bought for $1. Something in his face shifted. "Not much." "Enough." He looked back down at the ledger. "Cattle bunched near the creek today. If the wind turns, they may drift toward the north fence." "I know. North fence will not hold." "I know that too. I can ride it before light. You can eat breakfast first." He gave her a look. She returned it. After a moment, he looked away. and that was as close as he came to agreeing. The next morning, Elsie found the kitchen before Ada did. When Ada came in, the fire was already coaxed awake. The coffee pot sat near the stove, and Elsie stood on a crate to reach the table, cutting yesterday's cornbread into careful pieces. Not equal pieces, measured pieces. Ada stood in the doorway and watched her. "You do not have to do that." Elsie did not turn. "It is easier if someone does." "That sounds like Tobin." "It sounds true." Ada crossed to the stove and poured water into the coffee pot. "Did you sleep?" "A little." "Did you eat the bread you saved?" Elsie's hand stopped. "No. There will be breakfast today." The girl looked at the pieces on the table. "I know." But she did not unwrap the handkerchief in her pocket. Ada let it be. A promise was not a thing a child believed because an adult spoke it once. It had to be served hot, morning after morning, until the body stopped waiting for it to vanish. By the 7th day, Tobin had taken over the outside work in the way a hard winter takes over a road. Quietly, completely. He split wood before sunup, checked the cows before breakfast, patched the low section of the south fence, and came back with his gloves stiff from ice. He never complained. That troubled Ada more than complaint would have. Children ought to complain, at least some. Elsie kept to the kitchen. She learned where the meal was stored, how much salt pork remained, which jar had beans, which shelf held canned peaches Ada had been saving for after the baby came. She also kept not looking at the duster. Every time she crossed the main room, her eyes went around it. Not to it. Around it. On the 10th night, Ada sat again with the ledger. Tobin came in carrying a broken bridle strap. He set it beside the lamp. "I fixed what I could. Leather's gone dry. We have oil. Not enough." Ada made a mark in the ledger. Tobin watched the pencil. Then he said, "We'll manage." Ada looked at him. He said it again. Firmer this time. "We'll manage." From the hearth, Elsie spoke without lifting her head. "What about when the baby comes?" The pencil stopped in Ada's hand. The wind pressed against the walls. Tobin looked at Ada. Ada looked at the ledger, the thin pantry list, the bank dates, the snow packed against the window corners, and the 2 children Samuel Keene had left behind before becoming a man she had loved. "One problem at a time," she said. Elsie looked up. "That is not an answer." "No," Ada said. "It is not." That night, long after the lamp went out, Ada heard the 2 of them whispering through the wall again. Elsie's voice, small and tight. "She needs to know." Tobin answered low. "Not yet." Ada lay awake with one hand on the baby and her eyes on the dark. In the front room, Samuel's duster hung on its peg, holding its shape like a man who had not finished telling the truth. Elsie told the truth by accident. It happened on the 15th morning, when the cold had loosened just enough for Tobin to ride the north fence and Ada to mend a wool blanket near the stove without wearing gloves inside the house. Elsie stood at the table with flour on her hands. Pressing dough beneath her palms, she hummed while she worked. Low, uneven, a tune that did not seem meant for anyone else. Ada kept the needle moving through the blanket. "Where did you learn that song?" Elsie stopped humming. For a while, only the dough made a soft sound beneath her hands. "My mama," she said. Ada nodded once and did not press. The girl worked a little longer. Then she said, "Do you miss him?" Ada looked up. "My husband." Elsie nodded. "Yes." Ada said, "Some version of him." "What does that mean?" "It means I loved what I knew. I am learning there was more I did not." Elsie's hand slowed. "Our brother left us," she said. Ada's needle stopped in the wool. She did not lift her head. Sudden movements could scare truth back into hiding. "I am sorry," she said. "He said he was going west. Said he would find work. Said he would send for us when he had money." The girl pressed her palms into the dough again, but without rhythm now. "He never did." Ada's mouth went dry. The duster by the door seemed to grow heavier on its peg. "How old were you?" she asked. "4. And Tobin?" "9. Ada set the blanket down carefully. "What was your brother's name?" Elsie's hand stopped. Full stop. Her face changed before she answered. And in that moment Ada already knew. "Samuel," Elsie whispered. The room lost its warmth. Ada stood. The chair legs scraped the floor. Loud enough to make Elsie flinch. Ada hated that she had caused it. "Samuel Ward?" she asked. Elsie looked at her with flour on her fingers and fear in her eyes. "Yes." Ada turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the north pasture lay white and hard under a pale sky. Tobin was out there somewhere, driving a fence post into frozen ground, carrying a truth too large for any boy and too old for any child. Elsie's voice came small behind her. "Mrs. Keene." Ada kept breathing. In, out. The way she had done at Samuel's grave. The way she had done when the bankmen waited by the fence. The way she did whenever the world shifted and expected her to fall. "I am not angry at you," Ada said. "Jake." Elsie stopped herself. Tobin said not to say. "He was protecting you. He always does." "I know." Ada took her coat from the hook. She left Samuel's duster hanging. Not because it belonged there, because she was not ready to touch it yet. She found Tobin at the north fence, exactly where she expected him, driving a post back into line with more force than the job required. He heard her coming and turned. The moment he saw her face, he knew. His shoulders locked. "Elsie told you." "She did not mean to." "I told her not to." "She is 9. His jaw worked once. Ada stopped a few feet away. Snow creaked under her boots. "Your brother was Samuel Ward." "Yes. He changed his name to Keene. I did not know that until you said it in the wagon. But when I said Samuel, I knew." The wind moved between them. Cold. Purposeful. "And you said nothing." Ada said. Tobin's eyes darkened. "What was I supposed to say?" "That your dead husband was my brother who left us hungry in Kansas and built himself a new name out here." Ada took the words without moving. "They hurt because they were true. He left after your parents died." "Yes." "How long?" 6 years. 6 years. Ada thought of Samuel laughing at her kitchen table. Samuel oiling harness in the barn. Samuel kissing her forehead before dawn as if the day ahead had no ghosts in it. 6 years. And he had never said their names. Tobin looked past her, toward the house. "He was weak," the boy said. "Not evil. I know the difference. But weak can still ruin people." Ada closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them. "You are not going back to Crowtooth Crossing." His face changed so quickly he nearly hit it. "Nearly. I did not ask." "No. But you were waiting." He looked away. Ada's voice stayed level. "I will not punish you for what Samuel hid. I will not punish Elsie for remembering him. And I will not pretend this does not matter. What happens now? Now you finish the fence. I go inside and move that duster where Elsie does not have to walk around it like a grave. Then we count beans, meal, salt pork, and bank dates. Because grief does not stop cattle from needing hay." Tobin looked at her then with something almost like respect. "Not soft. Better than soft. Real." Ada turned back toward the house. She had gone 10 steps when he spoke. "Mrs. Keene." She stopped. "I think he loved you." The words landed harder than accusation. Ada looked toward the white pasture, the ranch Samuel had left behind, the child beneath her ribs, the 2 children he had left before her. "I know," she said. "That is the hardest part." Inside, Elsie stood by the table with the dough over-risen in the pan and her eyes red. Ada removed Samuel's duster from the hook. She folded it carefully. Not forgiven. Not thrown away. Folded. Then she carried it to the cedar trunk at the foot of her bed and shut the lid. When she returned, Elsie was still standing in the kitchen. Ada tied her apron. "The dough will sour if we stare at it much longer." Elsie blinked. You are not sending us away. No. The girl's hands began to shake. Ada reached for the bread pan and set it near the stove. We have bigger trouble than a dead man's cowardice, she said. How many cans of beans are left? Elsie swallowed. 3. Ada nodded. Then tomorrow we begin there. Outside. Tobin's hammer struck the fence post again. Inside. The empty peg by the door looked strange. Bare. Honest. And for the first time since the children arrived, the house held no secret in plain sight. The real blizzard came on a Tuesday night. Not the kind that drifted pretty over fence rails and left the world looking forgiven by morning. This one came hard across the Montana plain, flattening the grass, burying the wagon track, and driving snow so thick against the windows that the glass looked painted white. Bedone. The road to Crowtooth Crossing was gone. The barn was a shadow. The well rope had frozen stiff. Ada Keene stood at the stove with one hand against the wall and the other pressed low against the child inside her. Elsie saw first. You stopped again, the girl said. Ada straightened. I was listening to the wind. You were holding the wall. Tobin looked up from the harness strap he had been mending near the fire. Ada hated how quickly his face changed. Not frightened? Ready. That was worse. How long? He asked. How long what? How long has it been hurting? Ada looked toward the window, though there was nothing outside to see but white. Since before first light. Tobin stood. The baby's coming. It is too early. Tell the baby. The answer would have made her angry on another day. Today, it only landed where truth usually landed. Plain and without comfort. Ada sat because her knees decided before her pride could object. The road is closed, she said. No midwife. No doctor. No neighbor. Tobin nodded once. Then tell me what to do. Elsie stepped closer. Me too. No. Ada said at once. You are going to the back room. Elsie's small chin lifted. It was Tobin's expression on a smaller face. I am not. Elsie. I can keep water boiling. I can keep the fire up. I can bring linens. I can do something. Ada looked at the child. At the flour-smudged sleeves. The rag doll sat carefully on the chair behind her. The eyes that had learned too early that waiting alone could be worse than work. All right, Ada said. Fire and water. That is your job. No matter what you hear, you keep doing it. Elsie nodded. No matter what. Ada said again. I heard you. The day narrowed after that. The house became stove, bed, lamp, water, cloth, breath. Outside. The blizzard beat itself against the walls like it wanted in. Inside. Tobin moved with the hard quiet of someone who had done dangerous work before and knew panic wasted strength. He brought linens from the cedar trunk. He kept the lamp trimmed. He helped Ada from chair to bed when walking became too much. He did not speak unless speech was useful. That steadied her. Elsie carried water from stove to room with both hands wrapped in rags. Her face was pale. But she did not stop. Once. Ada heard her whisper something near the stove. Not quite a prayer, and not quite a song. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time lost its shape. Ada held to Tobin's voice when the pain took the rest of the room away. Breathe now, he said. Still here. I am right here. Once. When the wind struck the shutters so hard, the lamp flame jumped. Elsie froze in the doorway with a pot in her hands. Tobin did not turn. Fire. Elsie. The girl swallowed. Then she went back to the stove. Doing her job. The child came near midnight. When the world outside had gone so white and loud, it no longer seemed part of the earth. Then there was silence. Too much silence. Ada raised her head. Tobin stood at the foot of the bed. Still as fence wire. Tobin, she said. He looked younger then. Only for a second. Give her to me. Ada said. He did. The baby was small. Too small. Ada held her against her chest and rubbed her back through the cloth. Speaking low, Not words so much as sound. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Elsie stood in the doorway, both hands over her mouth. Tobin did not move. The wind screamed. The stove cracked. Then the baby made one thin, furious sound. A cry. Elsie broke first. Not loud, just a small sound that folded her forward before she crossed the room and pressed herself against Ada's side. She's crying. Elsie whispered, Yes. Ada said, her voice worn down to almost nothing. She is. Tobin sat on the floor, just sat down with his back against the bed frame, his hands loose on his knees, his eyes closed, like something inside him had finally set down a load. Ada looked at the baby. Dark hair, small fists, alive with all the anger a newborn could carry. She needs a name, Elsie said. Ada looked at Tobin, then at Elsie, then down at the child who had arrived early, in a house full of debt, secrets, snow, and people who had no business surviving as much as they had. May, Ada said. Elsie repeated it softly. May. Tobin opened his eyes. Ada held the baby toward him just enough. He reached out one finger, careful as a man touching a flame. May's hand closed around it. Tobin looked at that tiny grip for a long time. Hey, he said. Only that. But it was enough. Outside, the blizzard kept trying to erase the road. Inside, no one left. Not Ada. Not Elsie. Not Tobin. Not the child who had chosen the worst night in Montana to begin. And by morning, though none of them said the word family, the house had started saying it for them. May was 4 weeks old when Alfred Pike came back with the fourth note. Ada saw his horse from the kitchen window before she saw the man. A tall gray gelding, well-fed and clean-legged, picking its way through the half-thawed road with the care of an animal that had never been asked to starve. She set the coffee pot down. Tobin looked up from the table, where he was oiling a cracked bridle strap. Elsie stood near the stove with May wrapped against one shoulder. Swaying the way she had learned soothed the baby. Nobody in the room asked who was coming. They all knew trouble had a sound. Pike knocked once. Ada opened the door before the second knock could land. Mr. Pike. Mrs. Keene. He held his hat in both hands and looked properly sorry. Men like him had practiced sorrow until it became office furniture. May I come in? That depends on what you are carrying. He lifted a sealed envelope. Not from his own bank. Helena Mark. Ada stepped aside. Pike sat at the table. Tobin did not move from his chair. He watched the envelope like it might bite if a man gave it room. There is another note, Pike said. The house went still. Ada remained standing. Say the number. $214. Due by April 1st. It was secured against the full property. House. Barn. Remaining stock. All acreage. Elsie's swaying stopped. May made a small, offended sound against her shoulder. Tobin's hand flattened on the table. Samuel did that, he asked. Pike looked at the boy. Then back to Ada. Mr. Keene signed the note 18 months ago. The creditor held until probate cleared. Ada heard the words. Creditor. Probate. Full property. They came dressed clean. Like numbers always did. But what they meant was simple enough. Lose the ranch. Lose the roof. Lose the grave behind the barn and the baby's cradle by the stove, and the back room where Elsie no longer saved bread in her handkerchief. Tobin spoke first. Get out. Tobin. Ada said. He delivered it. He can go. Pike stood slowly. Mrs. Keene. I am sorry. Ada looked at the envelope. No, she said. You are employed. He flinched at that. Good. After he left, Ada opened the note and laid it beside the ranch ledger. Tobin moved closer. Elsie sat with May and said nothing. For an hour they counted. Pasture lease to Barlow Ranch in spring. Tobin's wages from calving work. 1 milk cow that could be sold. Half the north parcel. If Barlow would buy early. Every number hurt. None of them reached enough. By midnight, after the lamp had burned low and May had finally slept, Ada was still at the table with the pencil in her hand. $11 short. That was all. After selling land Samuel had mortgaged without telling her. After Tobin had promised his wages before he earned them. After Elsie had stretched beans until they seemed more memory than food. $11. A small number could be crueler than a large one. The back door opened. Tobin reached for the fire iron before Ada said, "Wait." Otis Granger stood in the doorway with his hat against his chest. He had been Samuel's hired hand 7 years before Ada let him go for want of wages. Winter had thinned him. Shame had done the rest. "Mrs. Keene," he said, "I know it is late. It is past late." "Otis." "I know." He looked at Tobin, then at Elsie sleeping in the chair with May against her, then back to Ada. "I made your husband a promise." Ada did not move. Otis swallowed. "I have kept it longer than I should have." He reached into his coat and placed a folded paper on the table. Ada knew Samuel's handwriting before she opened it. A rough drawing of the barn floor. Third board from the east wall. Behind the water barrel, her hand closed once around the paper. "What is under it?" "Tin box." Otis said, "He told me if he was gone and things turned desperate, I was to tell you." Ada's voice came quiet. "He could have told me himself." "Yes, ma'am." No defense. That made it worse somehow. They went to the barn with one lantern between them. The cold inside smelled of hay, old leather, and cattle breath. Tobin moved the water barrel. Otis pointed. Tobin pried the board loose with a crowbar. The tin box came up dull and dust-coated. Ada opened it on the barn floor. Bills. Coins. Folded careful. Samuel's kind of order. She counted by lantern light. $106. Enough to turn ruin into survival. Not enough to turn anger into forgiveness. Ada sat back on her heels. "We are still short 5. Tobin reached into his coat and laid 5 crumpled bills on top of the box. "Barlow paid me for fence work." Ada looked at him. He looked back. Steady and tired. "It is my roof, too," he said. Otis lowered his head. No one spoke for a while. The lantern flame moved in the draft. Ada looked at the money Samuel had hidden. The money Tobin had earned. The barn floor opened like an old secret finally brought to air. "He tried," she said. Tobin's jaw tightened. "Not hard enough." Then, after a moment, quieter, "But yes, he tried." Ada closed the tin box. The 4th note was paid 1 day early. Not clean. Not easy. Not without selling part of the land. But paid. And near the end of May, when grass came green along the fence line and May had grown round enough to complain with strength, a letter arrived from the Cheyenne cattle trail. It offered Tobin Ward a summer's wages. Enough money to matter. Enough distance to hurt. Ada found the letter folded beneath his plate at supper, where he had hidden it badly because part of him wanted it found. Tobin would not look at her. Elsie did. And in the silence, Ada understood the next debt was not written by any bank. It was the old fear of being left behind. Tobin Ward did not touch the cattle drive letter for 2 days. It sat beneath his plate at supper where Ada had found it, then moved to the corner of the table near the lamp, then disappeared into his coat pocket, as if paper could become less true when folded small enough. Elsie watched him without asking. Ada did the same. Some choices had to walk around a room a while before a person could face them straight. On the 3rd evening, Tobin came in from checking the west pasture and found Ada at the ledger. May slept in a crate cradle near the stove, wrapped in a blue shawl Elsie had mended twice. Tobin stood by the door. "They want me in Miles City by June 10th, he said. Ada kept her pencil still. "I know. Summer drive. Cheyenne Trail. 4 months. Maybe longer." I read the letter. $120 if I finish? That is real money. He looked toward the back room where Elsie was folding blankets. "It is a long way." "Yes." His jaw worked. Samuel went west. Ada closed the ledger. There it was. Not the cattle drive. Not the money. Not even the distance. The old wound wearing a new coat. Samuel left 2 children behind and built a life where they could not find him. She said, "You are taking honest work and leaving from a house that knows where you are going." Tobin looked at the floor. "What if I do not come back?" Ada stood slowly. "That is a different question than whether you are allowed to go." His eyes came up. "You are allowed," she said. "You are not owned by the hurt he made." Elsie appeared in the doorway then, arms wrapped tight around herself. "You have to come back," she said. Tobin turned toward her. No clever answer came. Only the truth. "I will." She walked across the room and pushed the rag doll into his hands. "For the trail," she said. He looked down at it. One button eye. Crooked, stitched mouth. Thin cloth, body worn soft by years of being carried through places. No child should have had to carry anything. "I cannot take your doll." "You can bring her home." That ended the matter. Tobin left on a gray June morning. No speech. No grand farewell. He saddled before sunup, tied his bedroll behind the cantle, tucked Elsie's doll inside his coat, and stood awkwardly near the porch while Ada held May and Elsie pretended very hard not to cry. Ada handed him a cloth bundle. "Biscuit, salt pork, dried apples. Eat before you are hungry," she said. "I know. Sleep before you are stupid." That almost made him smile. Elsie stepped forward and hugged him so fast he barely had time to bend. His arms closed around her, careful and fierce. Then he looked at Ada. For a moment, he seemed 15 again. "Welcome back," Ada said. He frowned. "I have not left yet. I am saying it now so you know what waits." He swallowed once, nodded, and rode south. Summer came hard. The ranch looked smaller, with the north parcel gone. But what remained held. Otis Granger came back 3 days a week for wages Ada could finally write down without shame. Barlow cattle grazed the leased pasture. Elsie kept the pantry, the stove, and May's temper with the gravity of a church elder. Every week, Ada marked the ledger. Not rich. Not easy. Enough. Letters came twice. One from Fort Benton, short and badly spelled. One from a rail stop outside Cheyenne, with a pressed grass stem folded inside for Elsie, and 3 words at the bottom. Still coming back. Elsie carried that letter in her apron pocket until the paper softened at the folds. By September, the air changed. The evenings cooled first. Then the grass yellowed. Then one afternoon, as Ada was bringing in laundry from the line, she heard woof beats on the south road. Elsie heard too. She came out of the house with May on her hip. A rider appeared beyond the cottonwoods. Dust on his hat. Shoulders leaner. Face browned by sun and miles. Tobin. Elsie ran first. She nearly dropped May into Ada's arms and tore across the yard before the horse had fully stopped. Tobin swung down and caught her. And for one long breath he just held his sister with his face turned away from the house. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the rag doll. A little more worn. A little more dusty. Still there. Elsie took it with both hands. "You brought her back," she whispered. Tobin looked at her. Said I would. He came to Ada after that. He took off his hat and placed a folded packet of wages on the porch rail. 120, he said, minus what I ate, plus extra for night guard. Ada looked at the money. Then at him. "You came back." He glanced toward Elsie. Toward May. Toward the barn and the house and the cottonwood stump near Samuel's grave. "Was supposed to." "No," Ada said. "You chose to." 2 days later, Alfred Pike rode out from Crowtooth Crossing with the final release in his coat pocket. This time, he did not sit until Ada told him to. He laid the paper on the kitchen table. Beside Tobin's wages, the pasture lease money, the last of the tin box cash, and the small account Elsie had earned selling soap and dried apple cakes to Barlow's men. Pike cleared his throat. "The remaining note is satisfied." he said. The bank has no further claim against Split Ash Ranch. Ada read the paper. Every line, every figure, every stamp. Then she slid it to Tobin. He read slower than she did. But he read it all. Elsie stood beside him, one hand on May's cradle. Does that mean they cannot take the house? She asked. Ada looked at the girl. No, she said. They cannot take the house. Elsie nodded once. Then she sat down hard in the chair, as if her legs had been waiting months to hear that. Pike removed his hat. For what it is worth, Mrs. Keene, you held this place better than most men would have. Ada folded the release carefully. It was not most men who held it. Pike looked at Tobin, then at Elsie, then at the baby sleeping by the stove. No, he said quietly. I suppose it was not. That night, Ada wrote the final line in the ranch ledger. Paid in full? The words looked too small for what they meant. She set the pencil down and closed the book. For a while, no one spoke. Then Elsie placed the rag doll beside the empty tin box. Ada placed her last silver dollar beside them. The same dollar she had once laid on Mr. Pell's desk, to take 2 children no one else had wanted to carry. Tobin looked at the dollar. You spent that on us. Yes. Good trade. Ada looked around the kitchen. Elsie by the table. May breathing in her cradle. Tobin, home with trail dust still on his boots. The best one I ever made. Elsie stood then and went to the pantry shelf. For a moment, Ada thought she was reaching for the handkerchief she used to hide food in. But Elsie only took down the supper plates. No bread tucked away. No corner saved against tomorrow. Just plates. One for Ada. One for Tobin. One for herself. And one small saucer set near May's cradle for the day she would be old enough to need it. Ada saw. She said nothing. Some healings were too quiet to name without frightening them. Later, Ada opened the family Bible. Samuel had kept on the bedroom shelf but rarely touched. On the blank page between births and deaths, she wrote 3 names in careful ink. Tobin Ward. Elsie Ward. May Keene. She paused. Then, beneath them, she wrote one more line. Split Ash Ranch. Autumn. Ichem Babai Joshayi. Not legal. Not official. Enough. When she came back to the kitchen, Tobin was standing by the front door with his hat in his hand. The old peg beside the door was still empty. The place where Samuel's duster had hung before Ada folded it into the cedar trunk. Tobin looked at the peg, then at Ada. Can I? Ada nodded. That peg has been waiting on someone honest. He hung his hat there. Not Samuel's place. Not a dead man's shadow. Just a hat on a peg in a house that knew his name. Later still, Ada went alone to the cedar trunk at the foot of her bed. Samuel's duster lay folded inside. She touched the patch sleeve once. Not worshipped. Not forgiven clean. Not hated enough to poison what remained. Just kept. A thing from a man who had loved badly. Failed deeply. And somehow still left behind the people who would save one another. Ada shut the trunk. Then she went back to the kitchen. The lamp was burning. Tobin was mending a strap at the table. Elsie was telling May, very seriously, that horses were better than banks because horses at least looked ashamed when they caused trouble. May answered with a small sound that meant nothing and everything. Ada stood in the doorway for a moment and let the sight settle where grief had once taken up too much room. Outside, Split Ash Ranch sat under the first cold stars of autumn. Smaller than before, clear of debt, still standing. Tobin had gone west. And he had come home, not because blood made him, not because guilt drove him, but because this time, the boy who had been left behind knew exactly where he belonged. This is a fictional story created for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.